It was an ordinary afternoon in Paris. The sky was overcast, thick gray clouds hinting at rain, but the city moved along with its usual rhythm. N'Golo Kanté, ever discreet, was strolling down a quiet street in the 18th arrondissement. Dressed in a plain gray hoodie, hood gently resting over his head, and carrying a small bag of groceries, bread and some fruit, he looked like just another passerby. No one would guess he was one of the most admired midfielders in world football. Despite his attempt to go unnoticed, Kanté had a presence that couldn't be ignored. 3 boys, around 12 to 14 years old, were kicking a ball around on the sidewalk nearby. Malik, the tallest of the group, was the first to recognize him. He nudged his friend and widened his eyes. "Dude, that's Kanté. That's really him." The others turned, and in seconds, all 3 were rushing toward him, barely able to contain their excitement. "Monsieur Kanté, is it really you? Can we take a picture?" Kanté stopped, slightly surprised, but offered a modest smile. He wasn't bothered, just shy. He put his grocery bag down gently and walked over to them. "Of course," he said quietly. Phones came out instantly. The boys huddled close, one stretching his arm out for a selfie. They were bursting with energy, their voices overlapping. "You're the best midfielder in the world. I play with you on FIFA every day. When you played in the World Cup final, my dad cried." Kanté laughed softly, flustered by the attention, thanking them politely. The little crowd began to attract a few curious glances. 2 teens stopped on the other side of the street. A woman carrying bags of groceries gave a knowing smile. It was innocent joy, brief, sincere, but not everyone felt the same way. A woman was watching from the doorway of a nearby shop called Les Jardins de Monique. Her name was Elodie, a stern-looking woman in her 50s with reddish hair tied up in a hasty bun. Known in the neighborhood for her quick temper, she often complained about noise outside her store. Today was no different. As she stared at the gathering outside, her irritation began to simmer. From behind the glass, her eyes narrowed. Every laugh from the boys, every shout of "Kanté" seemed to echo louder and louder. She threw down the cleaning cloth in her hand and stormed outside. "That's enough noise, this isn't a football stadium," she barked at the boys. Startled, they fell quiet. Kanté turned to her, confused but calm. "I'm sorry, madam. It was just a quick photo. They were already on their way." But she didn't want to hear it. Her face was tight with anger, not just at the moment, but at everything she couldn't control in her world. She glanced down, saw a banana that had rolled from his bag onto the pavement, snatched it up, and hurled it at him. "If you want to mess around, go do it in the trash," she shouted. The banana hit his shoulder and fell to the ground. Silence. The boys froze, eyes wide. No one moved. Kanté stared at the banana for a moment, then slowly looked up at the woman. Something in him deflated, not out of fear, but out of something heavier. Recognition. He had seen this kind of hate before, on the field, online, but never like this. Never here. He picked up the banana quietly and placed it back in his bag. Without another word, Elodie turned and walked back into her store, proud. But she didn't notice the elderly man down the street dialing a number on his phone, eyes locked on her in disbelief. She didn't hear the soft hum of a police car turning onto the street. But Kanté heard it, and the boys heard it too. And for a moment, none of them said a word. The police car came to a slow stop at the corner of the street. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the scene with measured eyes. Officer Morel, tall and composed, led the way, followed by his younger partner, Dupuis. The energy around the small group was tense, frozen in the aftermath of something unspoken, but unmistakably wrong. An older man, one of the bystanders, approached the officers, lowering his voice. She threw it at him. A banana. That woman from the store. It hit his shoulder. I saw it all. Morel nodded, then approached the man who stood quietly near the curb, still holding a grocery bag like a shield. There was a heavy stillness in Kanté's expression, the weight of humiliation cloaked in silence. "Sir, are you all right? Were you assaulted?" the officer asked gently. Kanté hesitated. Then slowly, He nodded. Yes, she threw a banana at me. I was with the kids. They just wanted a picture. She got angry and threw it. The children, still shaken, began speaking over each other, trying to explain what had happened. Malik, the one who had first recognized Kanté, stepped forward. She yelled at us, said we were making noise, then she picked up a banana from the ground and threw it at him, just like that. Morel gave a tight nod and motioned for Dupuis to approach the store. Inside, Elodie stood behind the counter, arms crossed, as if she were expecting someone to apologize to her instead. Ma'am, Dupuis began, we received a report of an incident involving you and a passerby. Did you throw something at this man? Elodie shrugged with a scoff. A banana! So what? He dropped it. I picked it up and tossed it back. Now that's a crime? Did you say anything to him or the children before that? They were making noise outside my store. It's bad for business. I asked them to stop. I was firm, that's all. Now I'm the villain? Dupuis' expression didn't change. We'll need you to come to the station to give a statement. Please gather your things. Her face twisted. This is ridiculous. This is what the world has come to? You can't tell kids to be quiet without being labeled a racist? Outside, Kanté had sat down on the edge of the sidewalk. One of the boys timidly placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't react at first, then offered a faint, broken smile. He looked down at the banana in his bag, now bruised from the fall. I didn't do anything wrong, he muttered. I was just walking. Morel sighed. I know. Sometimes that's all it takes. Dupuis returned with Elodie, now visibly flustered but still defiant. She avoided looking at Kanté or the children as she was led to the police car. A few pedestrians had gathered, murmuring in disbelief. Some filmed. Others simply stood in silence, trying to process what they had seen. At the station, Kanté was taken to a private room usually reserved for victims of abuse. They offered him a lawyer, support services, even a cup of tea. He declined most of it. He wasn't angry, just tired. He sat in a chair, eyes unfocused, listening to the distant hum of printers and footsteps in the hallway. No part of this made sense to him. In another room, Elodie was giving her statement, shifting the narrative. I didn't mean anything by it. I wasn't being racist, I just lost my patience. Those kids were being loud, and he was just standing there like he owned the place. But recordings from a cell phone proved otherwise. One of the boys had started filming right after the shouting began. The audio was clear. This isn't a stadium. Go mess around in the trash. The officers exchanged glances. The words spoke for themselves. News of the incident reached Kanté's football club quickly. His agent showed up at the station with a lawyer from the Players' Association. They offered support, but Kanté barely responded. He didn't want a press conference, didn't want statements written on his behalf. He just wanted to leave. By the time he was allowed to go, the sky had turned dark. Rain trickled down from the edges of the awnings as he stepped outside. His hood was still up, his shoulders hunched, the weight of the day pressing him into the earth. The banana was still in the bag. He hadn't thrown it away. He walked, alone, past the shop, past the children's soccer ball still resting near the curb, past the faces that watched him without speaking. Paris, as always, kept moving. But for N'Golo Kanté, something in him had been forced to stop. The following days blurred into one another. The incident spread quickly. Videos, headlines, furious tweets, television debates. Racism in Paris, football star humiliated on the street. The footage of a quiet N'Golo Kanté entering and later leaving the police station made the rounds, always paired with somber music and outraged commentary. But for Kanté, the noise outside only deepened the silence within. He stayed home, ignored his phone, didn't check the news. The banana stayed on the kitchen counter, slowly blackening. Each day he looked at it and left it there. There was no statement from him, no interview. He had nothing to say that hadn't already been said by a look, a pause, a heavy breath. The club offered time off, which he accepted. When teammates reached out, he responded with polite one-word replies, if at all. Some sent kind messages, others said nothing. The locker room, like the city, had its own form of silence. Elodie, meanwhile, was facing a much different public. Her store was vandalized twice. Spray paint covered her windows. No place for hate. Customers vanished. Reporters camped outside. She spoke to a far-right podcast, claiming she was a victim of reverse discrimination, that she had been destroyed for defending her business. Her lawyer called it a media witch hunt. But the justice system took the matter seriously. The case moved swiftly. The state charged her with aggravated public insult based on race, a formal recognition that what she had done wasn't just rude, but violent in its symbolism. The courtroom was sterile, cold, the kind of place where tragedy is translated into legal language and filed away. Kanté arrived without an entourage. His lawyer insisted he speak, if only briefly, and so he did. He didn't talk about his fame. He didn't mention the World Cup or the millions who admired him. He talked about walking, about being recognized by children who loved football, about a moment that turned joy into shame. I've played matches where thousands of people booed me. I've heard worse insults. But this wasn't a stadium, it was a sidewalk. And I wasn't a player, I was just a man. And still, that wasn't enough to protect me. Elodie sat across from him, arms crossed, eyes red but dry. Her lawyer objected, claimed the act was misinterpreted, blown out of proportion. But the audio played again in the courtroom. Her words echoed with all their weight. No one flinched. The judge found her guilty. 6 months of house arrest, a fine, a mandatory anti-discrimination course. And in order to pay symbolic damages, money Kanté had already pledged to a foundation for underprivileged youth. Reporters asked him for a comment as he left the courthouse. He didn't stop. He returned home, alone, the lights off. The banana was still there, now shriveled, the skin dark and soft. He picked it up, looked at it for a long time, then placed it gently into the trash, closed the lid, and stood in the silence of his kitchen. Back at the club, training resumed. He was present, on time, professional. But something in his rhythm had changed, quieter, duller. He moved with the same precision, but without the lightness that had once defined him. In the locker room, the other players gave him space. The coach patted his shoulder one morning and said, "If you ever need to talk..." Kanté nodded but said nothing. There was nothing to say. In the first match after his return, he played the full 90 minutes, made no errors, completed every pass. But when the final whistle blew, he didn't celebrate or shake hands. He walked straight to the tunnel. The cameras caught his face in close-up as he disappeared into the shadows. Not angry, not broken, just tired. That night, at home, he sat on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, eyes staring out the window into the dark Paris sky. The city moved on. The story faded from the headlines. But Kanté didn't feel closure, just a bruise that wouldn't fade. Because what had been thrown at him wasn't just a banana, it was a message. Even here, even now, you're still not safe. And that message stayed with him, quiet and cold, long after the cameras were gone.